Phil Rucker, this has been one of those weeks in the Trump White House that people will sort of time capsule and look back on. Remember that week in the Rose Garden when he said all that crazy stuff, none of them sentences. Remember that week when even the reddest states started to go their own way. And remember that week when one of the models predicted that 40,000 people could be saved if only a national mask mandate were in place.
Yeah, Nicole, I was there in the Rose Garden the other day, baking in the sun as the president went on for an hour talking about a wide range of topics, but only briefly touching on the coronavirus, which is the pandemic we're all dealing with day to day across this country. And, you know, he's grasping for ways to recover politically, to gain some momentum, a foothold in this race against Joe Biden. And the easiest thing he could do is just take charge of the pandemic. And get control of it and make people feel safer and more secure and get the testing where a lot of the public health experts believe it could be. And yet he's not been able or has not shown the discipline or interest in doing so. Instead, he's trying to pretend like the virus doesn't exist and trying to talk about all these other topics. And yet it's the virus that's keeping the economy from coming back quickly. It's the virus that's having him trailing in all of these polls. And you know, there's a lot of frustration when you talk to his allies, his advisors inside the government and outside the government, that they cannot get a handle on this virus and get it under control.
You know, Phil Rucker, I hate to dwell on this, but is there nothing about the loss of life or the scale of the tragedy that gets him?
Well, I don't know what's in his heart or what's in his mind at any given hour, but I can tell you that over the 3.5 years we've been watching him act as president, he has very rarely, if ever, shown sort of compassion and empathy and this sort of human emotion that we're used to seeing from our national leaders and from our presidents. And so, you know, certainly his aides all say he doesn't want to lose lives. And the president himself has said, you know, one death is one death too many. And yet we've not really seen him react, at least publicly, in an emotional way or in an empathetic way to the tragedy and the devastation that's playing out across our cities and towns.
Do we have any reporting that suggests he's called anybody that's lost a loved one due to the coronavirus?
I don't have that reporting, and I'm not aware of that ever happening.
And listen, Nick Confessore, I ask these things because I think the public polling reflects more than just people feeling horrible and sad and frustrated about the prospect of no school in the fall, about, for some small business owners, closing for the first time, for others having to reclose, and for the poor souls who have lost loved ones. 137,000 families in America have had their worlds blown up in the last 4 months. People that were alive before the pandemic hit the country are now gone. They're dead. And the idea that an American president that we know of, and I think that we can hold Phil Rucker in the Washington Post, and certainly I'll ask the same question of you in the New York Times, Nick Confessore. I think if the president were calling families, one of your newspapers would know about it. The deficit around empathy was always obvious, but there's something pathological about trying to ignore what the country is going through, Nick.
Well, it's clear that if you look at the polls, Nicole, you know, a 10 or 11% gap with the challenger is astonishing. It is a picture of a big part of the country just washing its hands of the guy in the White House and deciding he can't be relied on for what they need from a leader. Mm-hmm. And as Phil was saying, look, it would be fairly simple for most presidents to adopt a bare bones playbook, just steal it from your previous guest, Andrew Cuomo, do a regular briefing, have the scientists out front, show that you at least are trying to engage and be on top of this catastrophe that the country is living through, that we are all living through. People and businesses and the economy, everything is suffering here. And there's no sign that he really wants to stick with the role of leading the country through this. As you were saying, he wants to outmarket it. But you can't outmarket a virus. You can't outspend it. You can't bully it. It doesn't want an endorsement. It just wants to kill people and infect them.
That is so true, Nick Confessore. I think something else that is showing up in the polls is this incoherence I mean, there is an incoherence. Phil saying he sat in that baking hot rose garden. No one wants to be in the rose garden this time of year, as glorious as it is. And there is an incoherence, an inability to not just complete a sentence, but publicly complete a thought. Here's a contrast with Joe Biden doing just that, completing a pretty sharp thought, and Donald Trump struggling to do the same.
Mr. President, open everything now isn't a strategy for success. It's barely a slogan. Quit pushing the false choice between protecting our health and protecting our economy.
So there's never been a time when two candidates were so different. Here's one of the greatest differences. This is without question the single biggest difference if you want law and order. For instance, I enacted recently, when I saw all that was going on with federal monuments, we don't have the right to do states, although we're trying to find it. But with the monuments, where they wanted to rip down Andrew Jackson, they wanted to rip down George Washington, they were actually heading over to the Jefferson Memorial, if you can believe that. But this has been going on, and I found an act that we've used, and we have many, many people in jail right now. Many, many people in jail.
So, Nick, I should say it was hard to find a way and a place to cut any sound of Trump from that press conference, but that was the most cohesive message he delivered, that he's looking for a way to, I think, influence or regulate or jail people in states that hurt monuments of Andrew Jackson. I mean, if this is your jam, I don't. But I'm just saying, even if this is your thing, I'm pretty sure this isn't what's on your mind right now. You're worried about whether you can go back to work because you don't know if your school's going to be open, and you're worried about loved ones catching coronavirus.
Look, I think if President Trump thinks he can win a campaign as a referendum on which candidate seems less with it or more senile, I think that is a contest the Biden campaign is happy to fight. It's not that either of these two candidates are the most articulate in the world, but as you were saying, people don't care if Vice President Biden is going to stutter once in a while. What they care about is the catastrophe unfolding in their lives, jobs, their health, their family. And even if the president was going to run on the law and order campaign that he seems to want to, he's not really sticking with that script in a very effective way. In fact, he's not even acting like an order candidate. If you are a voter who wants stability, who wants to go back to the way things used to be, who wants like a bit less of the rough and tumble in the circus, Donald Trump is probably not your candidate, right? He's the insurgent guy. And in that sense, this election has sort of flipped the usual thing where the incumbent is still running as the bomb thrower and the challenger is running as the incumbent, I'll bring things back to normal guy.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.